Today we're joined by Julian and Joaquin Castro. Thanks so much for joining.
Great.
Yeah, great to be with you.
You know, we're here in San Antonio, Texas with the Build Back Better bus tour. What do you want to impress upon people with this tour?
I was born first, so I'll go first, even though he's the sitting congressman. Look, that in the about 8 months that President Biden has been in office, Democrats have been in charge. They're delivering results for the American people, including so many people here in San Antonio, getting people back to work, getting small businesses back open, getting shots into the arms of people to keep them healthy, investing in reducing child poverty, all of those things that add up to a better economy and a better quality of life. And we felt it here in San Antonio. I mean, what we see out there between now and a year ago is a real difference.
But, and Americans chose Democrats in November, and it's paying off. We had 4 years of a president turning people against each other, fighting with different states, slow to address COVID and all those things. And now you have a president and a Congress that are trying to figure out how to get Americans back to work, how to get people vaccinated so they're safe, and how to make sure people have opportunity in this country. And I think the best is yet to come.
Now, we're here, in San Antonio. You've been able to talk to the people who live here. What element of, this entire Build Back Better agenda, either the American Rescue Plan, the American Jobs Plan, the American Families Plan, both of which are forthcoming, should people know about but don't?
That's a great question. Look, this is my district, and this is a very hard-working community. A lot of humble people that are raising their families here, but they're not spending all their time, as some of us do, right, watching all the news stations all the time. And so, for example, even the expanded child tax credit, getting people familiar with that, the fact that more than 90% of people with kids are going to get more than $4,000 because of the actions of Democrats.
And do you feel like, having worked in the Obama administration, do you feel like this is kind of fixing an error, so to speak, in terms of messaging? There was great things were accomplished during the Obama administration, from the Recovery Act to obviously the ACA, and yet there was kind of a messaging void that was filled by Republicans who just, threw as much bullshit and disinformation and misinformation in there as they could. And so now, a big part of this entire effort is not only doing the thing, but letting people know what's being done.
Yeah, I think that the messaging is really building on both the successes and sometimes the shortcomings of the administration that I was a part of. I think also what makes a difference is that we saw how bad things were under the previous administration, under President Trump, and that the last few months have been focused on tangible results. When somebody gets that vaccine, they know the difference. They feel safer when they're able to go back to work. When that small business gets opened, it makes a difference. People feel that in their lives when that $300 monthly child tax credit hits their bank account, or they get that check. They feel that. They understand what Democrats are doing on their behalf and their family's behalf. And so it's delivering results and then, making sure that the messaging has been there, and it has.
Well, and we spent years, of Republicans saying that government couldn't do anything for people in their lives, that government was the problem. And I think people are seeing that, no, actually government can create opportunities for folks, can help vaccinate people so that they're safe. It can get its act together and actually do good things for the American people.
Competent, effective government, or else, then basically we're not going to be as successful as a country as we could be.
Well, and I think about, you see all these people in San Antonio in our community that have gotten vaccinated. They're making sure their kids get vaccinated now, even despite a lot of the misinformation that's out there from Republicans and on the internet. And I think about how it was so chaotic just a year and a quarter ago under President Trump, and people were scrambling just to figure out where to get a COVID test. They didn't know where to get a COVID test in San Antonio, much less go get a shot to get vaccinated. And the big difference from that to now.
Yeah, and I think that was by design too. When you have half the government, half of our elected representatives pushing talking points that this isn't a big deal so as to help themselves politically, it kind of fosters that exact confusion, chaos that breeds this kind of crisis in the first place. You know, especially with the American Rescue Plan, I think something that we saw was Republicans starting to dip their toes into the waters of trying to take credit for a lot of those successes, despite zero of them having voted for it.
There wasn't a single one of them, and I was on the House floor when we voted, obviously, and not a single one of the Republicans that supported helping to bring back the economy and bring back the American people.
And so now, seeing those benefits play out and seeing people's lives being changed for the better, what's your message to those Republicans who might have tried to take credit despite having all voted no?
Well, to not pretend like they tried. Don't pretend like you tried to do something. Don't pretend like you tried to change things, because they stood in the way, in fact. They argued very hard against the American Rescue Plan.
And they have a chance to correct their mistake. We got the American Jobs Plan, you know, this infrastructure package, reconciliation budget. They still have time to change their ways and actually start working on behalf of American families and making sure that those investments that need to be made in health, in jobs, in education, in infrastructure are made.
And by the way, the fact that we have a Republican Party that, for at least the bipartisan infrastructure framework, did vote to advance it, you know, with 19 defections through the Senate, is a testament to how successful the American Rescue Plan was. Because when you have a party like the Republicans who are so obstructionist as they are, for them to defect in such large numbers is a testament to just how massively successful the first element of the Build Back Better agenda was.
No, I think you're right. You're absolutely right. Look, they saw that this thing is working, that this is what Americans want from a president, from a Congress, from their government. And so finally now, in some respects, they're getting on board. There's still a lot of obstruction. There's a lot of disinformation by these guys. But at least on the infrastructure bill in the Senate, a lot of them just had to admit this is what the American people want.
Now, since Democrats took full control of government, we've seen 4 million jobs added. And in fact, in the last half century, I think Democrats have created double the amount of jobs that Republicans have, even though Republicans continue to try to push this messaging that they're the party of jobs, or the party of blue collar workers, and yet that's even despite the fact that the last administration just saw tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires, and then when we offered a better financial situation for the working class, like you said, they were 100% opposed. Do you think that Americans are starting to acknowledge or recognize that when Democratic administrations, Democrats more broadly, are in charge of government, that it's them who benefit, on jobs, on the economy, on basically every indicator of the health of our country?
Yeah, I hope so, because when it happens president after president after president in the same pattern, where Republicans talk about tax cuts being the thing that's going to save everybody, and how they're
this
working to make
mistaken
sure
notion since the 80s that trickle down economics, that we should be thanking God for the crumbs that we get that supposedly trickle down, and yet all the while income inequality is just growing at an exponential rate.
Well, and you point out a perfect contrast there, because look, under two successive presidents, a Republican president and Trump, when they had power, they passed a large tax cut for the wealthiest Americans, literally for the richest Americans in the country and big corporations. And when we were able to get power after November, we got voted in by the American people. We passed a tax bill that benefited the middle class and the working class and folks of modest means.
I think Americans get it more and more, which is, if you want a strong economy, put a Democrat in the Oval Office and put Democrats in charge of Congress. In the last 15 years alone, and we've seen a pattern, which is Republicans have used their power to give everything they can to the super wealthy and big corporations, and our economy has tanked. And Democrats have had to come and clean it up. And that's what Joe Biden is doing right now with the Democratic Congress.
I want to switch gears here to COVID. Governor Abbott tested positive for COVID. He's had his third shot. He's taking the Regeneron monoclonal antibody treatment. So he's basically benefiting from every safety measure there is, all the while pushing back against, enacting any safety measures for the people who he represents. Using his authority to block local mask mandates in schools and whatnot. That's even as the number of adults and children are being, infected with coronavirus, with this Delta variant, are being hospitalized at higher numbers. So what's your message to Governor Abbott in light of his own infection?
Well, unfortunately, Governor Abbott is turning Texas into the capital of COVID misery, and everybody wishes him well, hopes he gets better. But as President Biden said, either lead or get out of the way. And he's in the way right now of the science, not allowing schools to do everything they can to protect children. And at the same time, he gets VIP treatment with the third booster shot, with the Regeneron treatment that everyday Texans would not have access to. It must be nice. Of course, he's not worried about COVID because, when he got it, after he acted irresponsibly going to maskless events, crowded indoor events, he's able to avail himself of very great health care that most Texans do not get.
Well, and he's getting VIP treatment, but he's treating everybody else like punks. Really, he's treating the people of Texas like punks. Helping to spread disinformation, not allowing school districts to do everything they can to protect the kids. And I've gotten so many calls and emails from folks, parents who are nervous about the start of the school year, sending their kids to school. We've already seen school districts in Texas that are shutting down because you have so many people that have to quarantine.
Days into the school
year.
Days.
Absolutely, a few days in. And a lot of schools haven't even started yet. My kids are 5 and 7. They start next Monday. And so he's made the situation worse.
I have a 6 and a 12-year-old and that go to public school. We already get a note after 4 days about folks who tested COVID positive. Parents are getting those letters all across the state, and it's causing a lot of anxiety and a lot of anger toward Governor Abbott and toward Republicans.
You do speak about being able to speak to these Texans, and while you're focusing on Texans, you have Governor Abbott, who's basically pandering to the Fox News audience and getting his cable hits in every night, and that's clearly the audience that he's pandering to right now. But in terms of masks and vaccines, what do Texans more broadly want? Because for me, coming from a place like California, a lot of what I get is just national news, and you just kind of put everybody into this bucket of just assuming that, like, when you have somebody like Governor Abbott who does his Fox hit, that's kind of representative of the population more broadly. But is it?
No, and I really, some of the people that aren't getting vaccinated, there is a group of folks that are listening to the Greg Abbotts, to the DeSantises of Florida, to Donald Trump before, of people that are just ideologically, they don't want to get the vaccine, they don't want to wear a mask. But there's also a lot of Americans who are just not familiar with this issue, and people that are trying to figure out what's the real deal. They're just trying to figure out what's the real deal. Maybe they do have medical history, and then they go on Facebook and they read some article about how people that were pregnant 6 months ago now, the vaccine could put them in danger. And so they're not ideological people. They're just trying to sort out what's the truth.
You can't necessarily blame people who are following the advice that they're given. I mean, especially
Don't get me wrong. There's plenty of people that are being disingenuous and spreading disinformation and causing harm. But there's also a lot of Americans for whom this is not a political issue. They're just trying to get to the bottom of what's best for them and their families.
Well, about 3 days ago, we saw the first polling of how Texans feel, for instance, about whether schools should be allowed to require masks in class. 72% of Texans said yes, schools should be able to require masks. That's even as the governor has staunchly said, no, you can't do that to keep kids safe. So Greg Abbott and the Republican leadership is totally out of step with how everyday Texans feel when it comes to protecting our children and making sure that Texans are healthy.
Well, unfortunately, Texas is not 72% Democrat. So you've got a lot of Democrats, but you have a big chunk of Republicans
across
in
the board,
Texas.
Right? I mean, when it comes to these, especially these kids in classrooms, it goes beyond whether somebody's a Democrat or independent Republican.
Let's talk about the Texas Democrats who fled to Washington, D.C. As of this recording, those Texas Democrats from the state house have not given Republicans the quorum needed to pass their voter suppression bill. Now, some are saying that it's delaying the inevitable. Some are saying that it's massively helpful, that this is a last stand to prevent, a vile voter suppression bill from passing. Where do you stand, and what would you say to those House Democrats, as they continue to avoid the legislature, even under threat of arrest?
I'm proud of them. They took a stand. They prevented voter suppression legislation from becoming law here in Texas so far. So far, so good. There's still no quorum. This is the second special session. The longer this goes, the more pressure this puts on the governor, the Republican speaker, the lieutenant governor, to explain to Texans why in the world they're so focused on this issue when they can't identify any voter fraud. And more importantly, why are they so focused on this issue when record number of Texans are getting the coronavirus? We have so many hospitalizations that there are only 320 ICU beds left in the state, in a state of 29 million people. And we have more pediatric ICU beds being used up than any other state in the country.
55,000 people have died here.
Yeah, I mean, how bad the priorities of Republicans in this state are. So I'm proud of the Democrats that have stood up, and I hope that they continue to.
Yeah, I'm proud of them. I was part of a group of Democrats that left the state for Oklahoma for several days in 2003 to try to stop redistricting, Tom DeLay at the time. And I just appreciate their courage, their commitment. And they really, people were talking about voting rights, of course. It was a priority for Democrats in Congress, but they raised the issue and highlighted and spotlighted the issue even more. And so, I just give them a lot of credit.
Well, that seems like a good place to leave off. So, Julian and Joaquin, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good to be with you.